I get some of my best ideas when I give myself space. So anytime I'm trying to work on something or trying to figure it out and I'm feeling stuck, like I don't push through anymore. Now I take that as a sign of like, okay, now it's time to walk away. Now it's time to go for a walk. Now it's time to go watch Netflix, or it's time to just sit in silence for a little bit or read a book. And that's when my best ideas come. That's when, you know, those problems that you've been trying to solve the whole time just suddenly feel like, oh my gosh, yeah, of course, like that's what I'll do.
Quite often when we see people doing amazing things online, having huge success, we see, if we're honest, the highlight reel. We see all the highs, we see all the wins, we see all the after, but we never really get the true story behind what's going on and, you know, the hardships that people have had to overcome to get where they are today. But in this episode, we are changing that. I interviewed the lovely Amanda Riffee. Amanda is an internationally certified coach for women. She's an event speaker. She's got 17 years of corporate experience that she has now left to start her own business. She's the host of the Unleashing You podcast, and her mission is to help women unlock their mindset, see their worth, and create a career and life that they love with no burnout required. That may give you a clue as to what we'll be discussing here. Amanda's story of experiencing huge burnout in corporate is really pivotal to her turning things around, as well as some personal tragedies and a ton of other stuff that happened to be able to create this business and life that she loves. And no, it was not an easy road. And Amanda, luckily, is an open book and is sharing all about her story. So we talk about finding balance and setting boundaries and the importance of that when it comes to really being able to take control of our own energy and our own mental health. We talk about being intentionally productive. This is interesting because so often productivity can become quite toxic. And I share some of the ways that I'm maybe a little unconventional in my productivity. And Amanda shares as well some of the ways that she uses cycle syncing to be able to make the most of her energy. We talk about her transition from her corporate career into coaching, not only what that looked like in practical terms, but Amanda's sharing some of the limiting beliefs that she had to overcome in order to get where she is today. So I think you'll find this episode super inspirational. Amanda is a self-confessed ambitious introvert, and hearing the story and hearing what went on behind the scenes, I think can always be so permission giving and also help us see that the thoughts we have or any concerns that we have are usually shared by other people. It really comes down to making a decision to take action and do the things that we want anyway. So I really hope you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed interviewing Amanda. Amanda, it's so lovely to have you here on the Ambitious Introvert podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we chatted briefly after you applied to the podcast. So I feel like I know you because we had a kind of nice 20-minute call. So now it's like reconnecting with an old friend.
Yes, I love your approach because you never want to just like show up and be talking to a stranger.
No. You show up and you're like talking to someone that you've had a chat before, and it's like instant connection. So
yes,
yeah, I love it. So thank you for coming and sharing your journey with us, which I think is going to be a very permission-giving conversation for a lot of people because, as we'll get into, you have had a lot of success very quickly. But also you've overcome a lot of adversity to get to that place. And you obviously, as I said in the intro, you're so passionate about helping people avoid burnout. So let's start there. What was your own relationship and journey with burnout?
Yeah. So I will try to keep this concise because it's been a long journey with burnout and many times. But just to kind of give some background and some context on me, I was a corporate girl through and through. So I've been in corporate for 17 years, 16 of those with the same company. And so I started out very early in my career, really at a great company, but I just continued to want to work my way up and get that next promotion and get that next promotion. And along the way, there was just a lot of wins, but there was also a lot of lessons learned of who I wanted to become in that process, because I was just so career driven and goal driven that I can tend to just kind of put those blinders on and just be, go in for that next goal. And what I've realized about myself is that some really important pieces of me can fall by the wayside if I'm not careful. So I'll share probably the biggest and the most difficult of my burnout stories within my life. And I will say just a quick trigger warning for anyone who has dealt with suicide or losing a loved one. But I was traveling for work. I was in my dream job at the time. Don't regret any of it, by the way. I absolutely loved that job. It was a huge catapult for me for the next level of my career. But in that job, I was saying yes to everything and everyone. So I would say yes to every travel opportunity, every project, everything. Like I just was always yes, 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 because I thought that's what I needed to do to be successful in my career. And so when I break it down, I was traveling like 80, 90% of the time, which is just, oh, it hurts me now. It's like, think that was what I was
You
doing.
literally recoiled, as you say, you recoiled from the screen, as you say.
Because it's so opposite of how I feel today. But it was a part of my journey, right? It was something I had to learn along the way, because I always loved to travel. So I thought like, oh yeah, like that's so exciting. That's so fun. And it was exciting and fun. However, it was also very draining because I was a new mom at the time, and I was seeing my family more on FaceTime than I was in real life. And that worked for a short amount of time for me, but then I started feeling very conflicted. And it took the passing of my brother. He passed by suicide 10 years ago. And it was right in the midst of all of that. And as anyone who has dealt with grief at that level knows, like that just stops everything, right? That stops everything in your life. And amidst all of that, I started to feel something within me start to change or transform. And what came out of that on the other side, again, I'm giving really kind of the Cliff Notes version, because again, grief is just not linear. But on the other side of that, what I realized was like, what was I doing all of this for? Yes, I was getting all these promotions. Yes, I had a great job that I really, really loved. But was it worth all the sacrifice that I was doing in my life? Like I was missing so much time with my family. Life is precious. Life is short. And so what changed in me was I started to go to my leadership team and tell them how I was feeling, and telling them that, hey, this is starting to feel like too much. And what was maybe crazy, maybe not about that was very quickly after that, we were able to add another person to the team, cut my travel in half. And so it wasn't my company's fault. Like I signed up for all of that and I kept saying yes to all of it. And what I realized was the only person I wasn't advocating for was me. And the minute I started setting boundaries and putting pieces in place, like the external world caught up to me. And, I ended up staying in that job for several more years because I loved it and was able to find more of that balance. So I would say that was one of probably the biggest pieces for me that really changed my perspective.
I have an episode, it's probably about 6-8 months old now, and it's a long-term client of mine, Dr. Claire Emma Wild. And Claire is a coach for people pleasing and imposter syndrome. And she shared this great story on the podcast of how when she heard about people who say yes to everything, she was like, no, I don't resonate with that. That's not me. And then she realized they didn't even have to ask her. She'd already volunteered.
Oh, yes.
Before anyone had even made the ask. And that was the moment that she was like, okay, I need to do something about this. And it's so true. So many ambitious people, high achieving people, we want to say yes. We want to do the best. We want to support our team or our company, but to what ends? To what detriment?
Yeah. And that's why today, with the business that I have, and you can, look at anything that I put out there, right? It's all about creating that success, because that part of me is not gone. Like I am still very goal driven. I still dream really big. I'm, still want to achieve a lot in my life and in my career, but I found a way to balance that without the cycle of burnout, without all of the sacrifice. And I just don't feel like it has to be one way or the other. Like we can have wild success and still stay true to our values and what's important to us and who we are.
Obviously, part of being an ambitious introvert is taking time for ourselves, is recharging, is, spending time alone, not being a recluse, but spending enough time alone that we are recharged. And I think that this very kind of, I always think of it as very 80s for some reason. It's like an 80s masculine way of productivity, of go, 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 like burn the candle at both ends, burn the midnight oil. And then, obviously that's not working. We know that. We've known that for a long time. It's definitely not working for women. It's definitely not working for introverts. But you're a testament to this of you have achieved a lot in your business in a short period of time. You've, created great revenue. You've created podcasts. You've run events. You've done all these things. And you've done it without burning out. So you're like the proof in the pudding here for anyone that listens to this show, or anyone that's not fully sold on my message of, you need to rest to do your best. You are the living proof that actually you can still achieve a lot and be incredibly productive without burning out.
Yes. And thank you for that. Thank you for number one, noticing that and saying that, because that is just such a huge piece of how I operate. And what I think it really comes down to is I am so intentional with my time and my energy. So when I am with you, I want to be 100% in whatever it is that I am focusing on. Like before we got on this call, I put everything on do not disturb. Like I don't want to be distracted by anything, but I planned for that. And so right after this call, I blocked a 30-minute block because I know, hey, I have to show up. I need to be on, I'm giving a lot of energy. So I can't go straight into another thing where I need to give a lot of energy. So I 100% agree with you that I am very intentional about resting, giving myself breaks, giving myself time alone, giving myself just time on the couch with my kids and my husband. Because that does allow you to show up. The other thing that I have really realized that I think helps me even more in this is I get some of my best ideas when I give myself space. So anytime I'm trying to work on something or trying to figure it out and I'm feeling stuck, like I don't push through anymore. Now I take that as a sign of like, okay, now it's time to walk away. Now it's time to go for a walk. Now it's time to go watch Netflix, or it's time to just sit in silence for a little bit or read a book. And that's when my best ideas come. That's when, those problems that you've been trying to solve the whole time just suddenly feel like, oh my gosh, yeah, of course. Like that's what I'll do. And so I think giving myself that rest and those breaks is not only great just to conserve my energy, it's also one of the biggest reasons I think why I've been able to do the things I've been able to do over the last few years.
No one ever says, oh, I was sat at my laptop looking at a blank Google Doc and I had the best idea for a piece of content.
Yes.
It's always, I was out on a walk and I didn't have anywhere to write it down, or I was in the shower and I had to try and remember it and like you say, I had this exact thing yesterday. It's been quite a heavy couple of days with calls, with, some stuff that I'm working on. I've been at the laptop a lot, and I got to a point yesterday and I was like, oh, my brain's not working. So it's just time to switch off. There's no point in trying to push through. I'm just going to close the laptop. I'm going to go for a walk and enjoy my evening. And of course, halfway on the walk, I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I'll do that tomorrow.
Yes. I love that. Like, yeah, no one has ever said, I got the best idea staring at a blank Google Doc. We need to quote that.
No, it's like, I think this idea, I know that I had this when I very first started my business back in 2018. The longer I spend at the laptop, the harder I've worked, the more I've done. During lockdown, when I was really building it, because we had a very serious lockdown here, we couldn't leave the house for months. And I would be like, oh, I'd been working all day. Well, I hadn't. I'd been like scrolling Instagram and, maybe looking at some Facebook groups and just
Yeah.
like there was nothing productive. But I was like, I've been sat in front of the laptop for 8 hours. So I'm working really hard. And then I realized I can actually get done what I need to get done in like 2 hours a day and it's all good.
That is so true. I can't tell you the amount of times I have like sat from like a presentation or something. I'm like, I've just got to get this done. And then to your point, I'm sitting there and I'm actually looking at my phone and I haven't done anything. And I'm like, why am I even still sitting here? Like this is because then there's times of your day where that same task is going to flow so easy and you're going to get it done in 30 minutes. So I love that point.
I quite often wake up and do my emails. And I know a lot of people will say, don't do that. You have to do your best creative work for the first 2 hours of the day or whatever. But no, I'm really quick with emails. If I wake up, have my coffee, and then I'll, emails, clear it through. And then I don't tend to work till the afternoon because most of my clients are in the States. So, but getting that done, it's kind of like, oh, okay, the admin's done for the day. Then I can enjoy my morning and lunch and then come back in. It just works for me. That wouldn't work for everyone. And I think that's really important with productivity. For some people, doing their emails first would kill their creativity. But then again, I'm having, quite a break before I really dive into work.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of knowing your own internal energy cycles. I think as there's so much science out there that shows like females especially, we have approximately a 28-day energy cycle where we've got different days or different weeks of the month that we're primed for specific activities. And really the same is true for a 24-hour period too. We've got those peaks and valleys, or those times of the day where we are just primed for specific tasks. Some people work really well late at night. Some people work really well first thing in the morning or mid-morning, and I think it's really getting to know yourself and just what is the best way that you're going to be able to operate. Because, it's not about, like, you might think, like, to your example of like, oh, well, now she's only doing 2 hours of work instead of 8. But it's like, no, you're getting the same amount done, but in a much shorter amount of time. So it's not really about doing anything less. It's just doing it smarter for yourself and your body and your energy cycles.
I wish I was good in the evenings. With you saying that, I was like, I'm so not. When I have to be very careful if I get clients in Australia and New Zealand, because they're pretty much 12 hours out from us. So I'm like, that's either going to be a very early morning call or a late evening. And, kind of 8 o'clock, I actually just joined a mastermind and their calls are twice a week and it's 8 p.m. my time because they're based in the States. And before I signed up, I said, are the calls recorded? Because I know I'm probably not going to make 2 calls a week at that time of night because it's not my productive time. And they were like, yes, they're all recorded. I was like, okay, great. I mean,
Yes, it's so true. And, and then really setting those boundaries for yourself too, because it's one thing to know that. And then it's the next thing to just override that every single time anyway, right? Like you could have easily been like, okay, well, that's just what time the calls are. So I have to show up at that time 2 times a week. But instead you're like, okay, I know that's not necessarily my best time. Let me see what my other options are. Or, client calls. Yes, there's, I am sure there's clients that, even if we were in the same time zone, that, some would love to meet early in the morning, some would love to meet in the night, all those things. But it's like, okay, here are my windows, because that's when you can show up the best for them and give them your best version of yourself. And, it's the same thing, whether it's you're working on a project or presentation or, just needing to be on. I know even scheduling this podcast, because we are in different time zones. So I was very strategic of looking at, okay, what days does she have available that would fit within my windows as well, right? Because we could have recorded this at like 8 p.m. for me or, that kind of thing as well. But we ended up finding a time that worked well for both of us.
I'm very intentional with the podcast calendar. And sometimes people will come back and they'll go, there isn't a time that works. And we'll go, okay, let's look manually at scheduling. But generally, I like to keep it within that set time, because I know what the light's like here. And, I know that there's not, so I live in a city, that there's not going to be like school noise going on at these times. And and things like that. It's so funny. A very good friend of mine lives in Vancouver, and she's a night owl. She doesn't go to sleep till 2 a.m. And
Yeah.
I am here like 8 hours ahead and a morning person. So it's great because I wake up at like 6:37 and we can chat because she's awake. She's wide awake and I'm wide awake. It's like the only time of day that we're really both awake. It's so fun.
Yeah.
So I would love to know, was it burnout that led you to transition from your career to your business?
That is a great question. And the answer to that is actually no. But I think it's really because I have gotten so good at knowing what those signs are for me and what's coming. So I was actually at a point in my career. And again, this was about 2 years ago. And I was just at that point in my career where I knew there was something more. Like I was ready for that next level, that next thing, whatever it was. Like I had felt like I kind of, gone through the challenges for that job. And so that was kind of the early sign, because if I had just kept going down that path and ignored those feelings, I absolutely would have ended up at burnout again. But I think I saw those signs early without even really realizing it, because now it just becomes second nature to me. But that was when I was like, okay, what could I do? And I actually, I didn't really want my boss's job at that time. I thought I could move to this team or this department, but nothing really felt right. And that was when I had, that idea on a walk, because I was listening
Of
to
course.
actually an audiobook. Yeah. And I was like, what if I started something on the side? What if I took this opportunity and when I have this a little bit extra capacity and energy to create something on the side? And I'll be very honest, like even with that, it felt super scary to, number one, go to my husband. Like, I think I want to get certified as a coach. I have no idea where it's going to go or what it's going to do, but I think that's and he's amazing, always supports all of my crazy ideas. He's like, whatever you need to do, go do it. And, but even then I was still thinking like I could get 1 to 2 clients here or there on the side, keep my corporate track, all of those things. And I kid you not, like I was not even 3 months in, I was getting coached myself for the first time at that time too. And that is what, and I feel like you'll agree with this, that when you get coached, you just start to see so many more possibilities for yourself that you did not know existed. Like for whatever reason, you just didn't think they were for you, or you just couldn't see them. And so that, again, that was 2 years ago. And fast forward to today, I now work solely as an executive and career coach. I'm growing my own business. I host events, retreats, one-on-one coaching, like all of the things. I'm writing my first book right now. If you would have asked 2 years ago, Amanda, is this what we'd be doing? Like, you're crazy. No. But I think, it's, and maybe that's a testament to being able to make pivots before you hit that huge burnout, wall, that you can pivot a lot faster because you see it coming, you need to make a change, even if it's scary, you don't want to keep going on that same track. And I think that has been a lot of what has happened for me.
Yeah. If you are trying to create something like completely new, whether it's a business, whether it's a completely new career track, from an empty place, from that place of burnout, you're not going to feel inspired. You're not going to feel creative. It's just going to, it just feels heavy even thinking about it. But like you say, you're in a place where you're managing your energy, you have the capacity, you're excited by something, and you had that fuel to be able to give it to grow.
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely did. And I don't want to mislead in thinking that it wasn't terrifying. And there wasn't there wasn't just so much personal growth I had to do in that time frame as well. Like, I mean, every limiting belief that I had ever thought about myself was coming to the surface when I decided to do something new and scary. And, and so those are things that, I needed to continue to work through, but it always felt worth it for me. It always felt like this dream is worth it. It's worth feeling uncomfortable. It's worth feeling scared. I now have the tattoo on my arm that says feel the fear and do it anyway. Because up until that point, I was really that person that felt like I needed to be fully 100% prepared, prepped, know everything about everything before I did it. And I realized along this journey that number one, that's going to hold me back. That is going to hold me back. And I'm not going to be able to find the growth that I'm looking for until I just do it, scared. And I realized that that's actually how I build the confidence, is by doing things scared. Like when I hosted my first big event, I did by no means feel ready, but I just kept taking the next action, just the next action, the next action. And now, now putting these events together, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah. It took away so much of that terrifying feeling, because now I've proven to myself I can do it. And so I think it's a lot of trusting yourself and doing things uncomfortable, doing things scared. And that's a big reason why I've been able to become the person I am today and, hit the goals that I've set out for myself.
I want to come back to those limiting beliefs, but first I have to share the first business coach I ever worked with. So not the first coach, but the first business coach taught me two very important things. One is that you'll never be ready. It will never be perfect. And the second was, as an entrepreneur, you will never finish your to-do list. And she's like, be okay with that. Like, get okay with that and decide that it's okay, because there's always something else. You'll always have another idea. There'll always be multiple things going on. And I think in life admin, I used to feel much more like tick, 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 it's done. And then as an entrepreneur, I'd be like, oh, but there's still this and there's still this. And there's always something to do, and getting okay with that and knowing that, and not feeling like I had to work until it was done, but being like, okay with going, see tomorrow to-do list.
That is great advice.
Yeah, no, she is very smart. It was great advice. I wanted to come back to the limiting beliefs, because as you said, like, it brings up starting a business, I think, is one of the biggest personal growth challenges you can have. And as you were saying, like, every limiting belief came up. I was thinking about mine. It's like, no one's going to pay me for this. Who do I think I am? What if I don't make any money? I'm too old to do this. I don't want to put my face on the internet.
All of the things.
Oh, it's so funny. And now it's, beliefs still come up, right? Things still come up to challenge us. But when I look back at those, they felt so real. They were so kind of pervasive and like crippling almost, sometimes. And now I'm like, oh yeah, I just used to think that. And they don't have any charge. It's just very neutral.
Yes. My favorite thing to say about limiting beliefs, because to your point, they feel so true. Like, they feel like fact. Like, that is 100% true in the moment. And what I think is, it kind of takes away the power of limiting beliefs, is when you think about, what's truly a belief? A belief is just a thought we have thought for so long that we now believe it to be true. And at some point, whether we realize it or not, we actually chose to believe that, whether that was in childhood, something that happened to us at work or in our lives, but we actually chose, subconsciously or consciously, to believe that. And so that means we can choose again. That means we can choose another path. It's not actually fact. And that's what in coaching, I love to kind of come back to, where did it all begin? We start with like, okay, like, when's the first time you can remember feeling that? And it kind of takes away the charge of that limiting belief, because you realize, like, oh my gosh, that was because in school, this girl said XYZ to me and I made it mean this. And now I've taken it all the way through my whole life. And that is, again, like, oh, that is actually a fact. That's just something I've told myself for so long that now I think it's true.
I know as a child, I believed everything any adult said to me. So whether it was my parents or a teacher or, dance instructor or anything, because they were adults. So they knew everything. And now I'm an adult. I'm like, oh, nobody's really got this figured out. And I was just blindly believing everything they said, like you said, like it was fact. So if they said, oh, you're too quiet or you're too loud or any of that, I would have just taken it as fact, which is where so many of these things get cemented in. And now I look, I'm like, they probably didn't even know what they were saying, or, it just didn't even realize. But I
Yes.
took it as gospel, literally.
And I think it's so interesting too, especially when you think about as kids. I think it would be so probably eye-opening for us to actually go back, if we really could be a fly on the wall in those situations where, I don't know, maybe in that moment you were in the library and they're like, hey, you gotta be quiet. You know what I mean? And you just like, I am too loud forever and always. You know
In
what I mean?
every single situation, I need to be quiet from now and forever. Yeah. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
exactly.
It's like no context. No context.
Right.
It's just you're told something.
And then we can't even remember the detail. Like, we don't actually most of the time remember, or it's all filtered through our lens. So who knows if that's even really all the things that happened.
I mean, I know so many of my clients and peers who are introverts as well. The rest and, resting and relaxing, there's a lot around that as ambitious people. And a lot of that comes back to people's childhood. And they'll be like, oh, but I was lazy if I did this, or I wasn't allowed to rest until I clean my room, or, and all these connotations that we make that have absolutely nothing to do with what we're doing today. Makes it, makes no, like closing the laptop. We're not going to get in trouble because we didn't clean our room. We still have that feeling of like, well, I can't stop, I can't relax. And so much of that is just, until we stop and question, well, why? Why do I feel this way? And why have I got these thoughts? We don't actually know. And we just carry on and carry on.
Yeah. I think, that just to anything, right? Awareness is always the first step, because, when a lot of times when people are then become aware of that, they're like, oh my gosh, like they beat themselves up or they feel shame or whatever. But it's like, no, now you have the power, because before you were just operating on autopilot, not even realizing that that's what you're doing. Now you've got that awareness. So now you can stop yourself. Now you can start to choose a different path. And I think, that awareness is just so, so powerful to actually be able to start rewiring some of those beliefs.
I love it. Completely agree. And I think, like so many coaches, my journey was a little like yours, where I got coached. And then once you've been coached and you see the world in a different way, if you get a great coach off the bat, first session, you come out and you're like, am I even breathing correctly? Like, what is this?
Questioning everything.
Yeah. What even is this? And that is what, so many people I speak to that have become coaches, it's because they had that really profound experience of being coached. So they deeply understand how powerful it is as a modality, and they want to be involved in it.
Yeah. And I love the way you explain that, because I always say, like, until you feel it yourself in a coaching experience, it is so difficult to really put it into words. Right? Like, you can say the word transformation, or you can say the word growth, or, any of those things. But until you feel it, it's like, oh my gosh, like the shifts you feel inside are just, it's almost like magic. Like, it just feels so undescribable, of like just taking those blinders off and just seeing things through a whole new lens. And then you can follow it up with action, and then you get, all of those things. But it's those inner shifts sometimes are so hard to put into words.
It's so true. Oh, I love it. Thank you, Amanda, for sharing your story with us. Thank you for being vulnerable and being so open and honest. And I love the work that you're doing, obviously, in helping people to avoid burnout. And in the theme of that, before I let you go, I'm going to ask you, I know you'll have many of these, but what is one practice or routine that you have in place to really own your energy so that you can keep performing at your best?
I love this question. My answer probably would have been different, but we talked about energy cycles already. That would have probably been my answer, but I'll give something a little bit different so I'm not repetitive. I am huge into listening to my body. So I could get a to-do list. I can get a plan. I could do all of those things. But like just yesterday, I had lots of things I could be working on or should be working on. And I asked myself, what feels good right now? What would I be excited to work on? What would I be excited to do right now? And it turns out, like, the thing I was excited to work on wouldn't have hit the top of my to-do list, But that was what it flowed, because that was what I was lit up about. If I had picked the thing that was on the top of my to-do list, it would have felt forced, and I would have done the thing of sitting up a Google Doc and just, that sort of thing. Sometimes it's, hey, you need to go for a walk. You need to move your body. You need to take a nap. You need to eat something. I really, really have learned to listen to my body's signals and just tap in and say, okay, what feels good for me right now? And that has helped tremendously.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. It was wonderful to see you again. Thank you for being a guest on the Ambitious Introvert.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. I hope that you're feeling expanded to what's possible for you, motivated to take action, and inspired about how you can start to own your energy. I share even more tools and resources on my Introverts Only email newsletter. By signing up, you not only get early access to the Ambitious Introvert products and services, but you also get brand new podcast episodes delivered straight to your inbox every Monday, meaning you'll never miss your weekly dose of introvert-friendly inspiration. Sign up now at theambitiousintrovert.com/newsletter or click the link in the show notes. See you next week.